Welcome to the Cali High podcast. I'm your host, Chenzo Nico, and I've been a cannabis connoisseur for a very long time. Today, we will be talking all things cannabis as they relate to California and beyond. From the history of buds in the state to the laws that govern its use. From notable personalities and brands in the field to the relevant arts and music and how they shape the industry. This is Today, Cali High is honored to be here with Lesa Slaughter, California cannabis attorney. Hi, Lesa. How are you? Thanks for having us.
Hey, thank you for being here. It's my first time on Cali High. Hi, everybody. Really looking forward to it. You have a fabulous show,
well, thank you very much.
Which is a great audience, so happy to be here.
They're a bunch of nice people. So, can you tell us a bit about your background and what type of law you originally studied and how you got into cannabis law?
Yes, actually, it's a really interesting story on how I got to cannabis, but a little bit about my background is I started out at Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher & Flom, which was the big international law firm that initiated and began the M&A, did a lot of litigation there, did a lot of transactional, and did some real estate. Like the real estate aspect of it, the entitlements and components there, and the litigation aspect of it. And then eventually left Skadden Arps, and when I had my kids, started out my own firm and ended up in cannabis quite accidentally. Our office in Woodland Hills is above a dispensary. We have clients come in, and the dispensary was literally smelling the office up horrifically. I mean, I had complaints from employees. It was clients coming in. I mean, you know, are we smoking pot? People tend not to want their attorneys stoned when they ask for advice. So I went down and talked to the dispensary owner, and this was very early on when LA had just started to develop more of its cannabis regulations, even before Cap Packer had come on. And I talked to the owner, nice guy, and asked him a few questions about land use and some of the regulations, because I deal with a lot of other regulatory industries. And the guy, God bless his soul, had no idea of what I was talking to, and eventually had to vacate the premises and was shut down. So I said, wow, this is a great area. Most of the attorneys in this field come from criminal backgrounds because that's what clients needed. But this is beyond a level of activism. This is now a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they need sophisticated legal counsel that can handle everything from the regulations all the way up to the mergers and acquisitions.
Absolutely.
Yes, so that's how I got into it, and literally still in the process of getting up my website. All my business has been referrals, so it's been great. I've had some great clients that have been with me for a while.
Well, that's excellent. Wow. So what do you see the opportunities in the cannabis business in the next year or two?
Wow, it's really changing. That's a great question. As you know, most cities have been shut down with COVID for a length of period of time. We've seen a lot of small businesses. We're talking restaurants, we're talking, hair salons, we're talking, small businesses that have been shut down. And as a result, in hotels, of course, right, that have been shut down for a long period of time, and bars. Those industries generate a tremendous amount of sales tax for cities. Transit occupancy tax, which is a tax on hotels, and sales tax, of course, and then gross receipts tax. These cities are laying people off. That's fairly unheard of in government. Government tends to grow, not contract. So as a result, what we're seeing is a lot of cities are opening up going, gosh, we need more revenue. We have to figure out a way to get more revenue. I mean, the city of Santa Monica is laying people off. Cathedral City, Sacramento. I mean, this is pretty unheard of statewide.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm seeing a number of cities start to look at, wow, what do we need to do to regulate cannabis? You have a number of initiatives on the ballot. Even very conservative Ventura County has an initiative on the ballot coming up here in November looking at licensing cultivation. I mean, that's pretty rare. You had Oxnard recently open up.
Oh, yeah.
You've got more cities, Sacramento saying, hey, okay, I think we can use some more. You've got even the city of Anaheim was looking to put something on the ballot. It didn't. It ended up not going forward. But that to me has been really surprising. But a natural outcome of where these cities need money. And this is one of the ways to do it. Now, this is also the downside of California. We're seeing cities that are absolutely saying, oh, this is a this is nothing but cash. This is like planting trees and monies grow. And when you look at the regulated industry, that is not the case. People think the profit margins are like 50%, 60%. That's not true at all. You're lucky if you get 10%. Again, you don't have the advantages of some of the depreciation that you would get on all your equipment, right, under federal law.
Yeah, you get to write off nothing.
You get to write off essentially nothing, right? It's very difficult. You're dealing with there's some credit unions now, and there's banking slightly starting to open up, but that's the downside. Is hopefully these cities are not going to kill, the goose that laid the golden egg for them. And unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing some of these cities do. And if you take a look at the history of city taxation in California, right, when cities tax on top of the state tax, right, just a cannabis, the excise tax, you're seeing that cities will actually go down. They'll start out with 10%, they'll go down to 4%, they'll go down to 5%. The way the tax situation works in California is you can't enact a tax without a 2/3 vote of the people. So the cities are going, okay, let's tax it at the max, we can always go down. So that's what we're tending to see.
Although, is LA going down?
LA is actually shockingly very competitive when it comes to taxes. It's not very easy to enter the market, as we know, and it's very difficult to advance through the market. There's a lot of volatility and unpredictability, which is really sad for Los Angeles, right? In many ways, it's shocking to me that LA County is not open.
Yeah.
And that they looked at it a few years ago. I had a client who was involved with that, and a number of clients who wanted to watch it, and it just never happened. So I think this is going to change. I also think it's going to change on the federal level, frankly, regardless of who gets into office, because we're in a massive downcline and recession, right? There's you don't have 12 million people out of work and not have some impact in the economy. And if you take a look at what happened with the stock market crash, way back when, that was during Prohibition. Government eventually wised up and figured, hey, you know what? We need the money. We're just going to have to let these people do it, and we're going to have to tax the crap out of it because we need the money. And we've got a big national deficit. So this is the trend that I'm seeing. We're seeing banking acts move through Congress, getting further along than we have before. So that's what I think California cannabis growers, manufacturers, dispensaries need to prepare for. Prepare for that federalization when it's legal and see what's going to happen in that particular aspect.
Do you think the mom and pops are going to be pushed out of business by large corporations?
People have always said that about any industry that's come up, right? And if you remember, it's always the mom and pop businesses that started it. Anheuser-Busch was small, R.J. Reynolds was small. So it really depends on, again, how you're positioning your particular industry or your particular business to expand. I mean, one of the things I always say to my clients is, what is your exit strategy? Right? What's your exit strategy? Do you want to hold on to this and have it a legacy business for your family? Or do you want to eventually sell this thing and make a lot of money and then either go off to the next thing or start another one? So that's what people should start to think about now is, what is your exit strategy? Where are those records that anybody doing due diligence is going to acquire you? Or if you want to acquire, you're going to want to ask for, right?
Right.
The transition out of the gray market is 3/4 of the way there. There's no reason you shouldn't have documents at this point.
Oh, yeah. So what are the common mistakes cannabis businesses make and how to avoid those? The biggest common mistake that I see, and hopefully this will change, is the handshake deal. I mean, we all know it well. Right.
That was a time.
A verbal agreement.
A verbal agreement. Hey, he's my buddy. She'll take care of me. He'll take care of me. We have an understanding that eventually, now that we've seen the legal market, people forget. They have memory lapses, right? There are no documents. Gee
Conveniently,
whiz, you know what?
Yes.
But great. You think I owe you all that money? Come on into court and prove it to me.
What about my 1%?
Exactly. Where's my? Yeah, exactly. I'm on the license, but there's no documentation showing I'm entitled to anything. Yeah. So that's definitely one of the biggest mistakes. And one of the things I say as an attorney, having a litigation and a transactional background, that I was taught is, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's not rely on oral conversations. Let's really make sure that we have everything documented and in writing.
Right.
So that's by far the biggest mistake that I have.
And if the conversation was recorded, would that make a difference?
Not really, because
Not
again,
really,
I mean, maybe it would help you. It depends on the situation, but part of it is, in California, you have to have the consent of both parties.
Yes.
Right, to record something. And I think I think it helps, but to a certain extent, if you went as far as to, if I were on the other side, I'd say, hey, then why didn't you memorialize it in writing, right? If I'm representing the other side, I'm going to say, hey, okay, well, you took the time to record it. Why didn't you write it down?
Exactly.
Right? So again, when you're at that position with litigation, right, which is never the desire, right?
No.
You're really going to have a tough time proving your case. So start documenting it now.
Yes. Well, so how has California cannabis law changed since you've been representing cannabis businesses?
Well, cities have opened up. I swear it was like the devil. Cities just looked at it as though the devil was coming to town and gonna just, take the youth from school and everything.
Oh my God.
I mean, it was just like
reefer madness.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing that I've changed, and gratefully from what we've seen in Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and what I've used on behalf of my clients when advocating for licensing or for specific areas to open up, because usually when a city does open up, it's a very limited area, limited type of zoning, and it's very intense distance requirements.
Oh yeah, 1,000 feet from a church, a school.
Sometimes 600. Cities have a great deal of autonomy here in California to apply regulations. They're not obligated to apply what the state does, right? So they can add more layers to it. One of the things that we've seen and we've introduced, we being my firm, on behalf of clients, is the studies that show crime goes down, right? Your average 7-Eleven, and no offense to those who own 7-Elevens, but usually those type of businesses have a lot of loitering and a lot of vagrancy. They're not required to have extra lighting on the exterior. They're not required to have 24-hour cameras.
Or a guard.
Or a guard or anything like that. So what the studies show, and what we've seen in Los Angeles and we've seen in Cathedral City and Sacramento and San Diego, is that roughly the radius about 3 to 5 miles around a dispensary, crime drops. Right?
It does.
Yes. And part of it is because these buildings were not necessarily the most desirable for retail tenants, right? So now you've got a retail tenant coming in and typically paying well over market rate. You've got guards. You have a business that understands that it's got a license of privilege, not a license of right. They want to interact and they want to solve problems. I mean, 7-Eleven doesn't have a number posted on the front who to call if somebody's, parking in your driveway, right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing that I've seen, is that the electorate and government is starting to realize, okay, you know what? It's not reefer madness. It's not, hell in a handbasket. People aren't going insane. It's regulated.
More normalized.
It's a little more normalized. The stigma is slowly dropping off.
Slowly,
yes.
So what are the majority of your cases concerning?
Mostly I'm doing a lot of licensing now, which is good because a lot of cities are opening up. One of the things that I see is licensing now has become, it's like writing for a federal defense grant. I mean, it is, I'm not joking, it's 150 pages of very detailed standard operating procedures, community relations,
I've read
charitable.
them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, they're extremely detailed. Then there's the interview process, sometimes the land use process that follows that. The biggest mistake that I see clients making is, penny wise and pound foolish. They don't want to pay somebody to write a fantastic license that's going to win. They want to. They don't understand that what you're applying for is a multi-million-dollar license, and you just want to pay a few $1,000s. I mean, that's not the reality. You're going to get what you pay for, right?
Right.
And on the other hand, it's also very upsetting in many ways to smaller, really great operators, because applying for licenses are now, very, very expensive, from the fees to the amount of money that you'll pay your architect, your attorney, your your safety consultant. It really adds up. So the average person is not really able to do that, right? A small mom and pop operator is not able to do that.
And if you have a grow, then you have to deal with the fire department and the electrical department.
Yeah, all that. I mean, it's expensive to hire architects and security folks and attorneys, right? So the other thing I'm seeing too is that the move from social equity, unfortunately, very few cities, even Long Beach has done a pretty good job, but very few cities have been able to really execute the social equity component on a successful basis.
I agree.
What the objective is fantastic and it should be pursued and continued, but it's set up in such a difficult way that it's really disappointing that cities have not, a lot of California cities and counties just have not hit that objective. So what I'm seeing some cities go to is local equity, because then it's a lesser amount, right? It's under that 51%, so you can actually attract an investor, right? Very few investors are willing to give over 51%. Here's a few $1 million. I know you don't have experience, or you have a little experience, and I'll just sit by and say, I really hope it works out, right?
Yeah.
So they're looking at things like 20%, 40%, and local equity with certain benefits and points for people of color, veterans, women-owned. So we're starting to see it change a little and shift.
So would that lower the fees and the taxes
it has.
for
one city,
the social equity recipients?
Yes, one city has looked at having that fee paid over a longer period of time, the licensing fee. I mean, we'll see. The downside is, and one of the things I've seen in the industry is it's starting, but there's not a big cohesive trade group for one particular industry or one particular faction. UCBA, I think, has by far been the most successful statewide. I work with them. It's an amazing organization.
Yep, we've interviewed Jared Kylo twice.
Absolutely amazing policymaker, dispensary operator, really, really fantastic, and really understands the lobbying component, right? So I'm hoping to see more organization around social equity in terms of trade groups, and really looking at, hey, this doesn't work. And we'll see what the state does, right? The state's in the process of rolling out the social equity component of the state, the state aspect of it. So we'll see what happens.
I wonder if the city will mess that up.
It's quite possible. Quite possible.
So, do you see a common thread in the running of most of the profitable cannabis businesses?
Yes, they take compliance really seriously, because I think what they've realized is, again, if you're not compliant, first of all, depending on the level of severity of the lack of compliance, is you get fined. I mean, is it really worth $200,000 of a fine? Or does it make sense to pay a few $1,000s to an attorney or the right consultant to come in and do a kind of a mock walkthrough for compliance? And to me, that's always been very baffling, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to invest in your investment, and that's preserving it and securitizing it and protecting it, right? That's your insurance, and so much insurance isn't available to the cannabis industry. So that's the big thing that I've seen, and I think that the time frame from when the BCC, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, California Department of Public Health, has welcomed everybody into the fold and not been so disciplined about or so focused on regulatory compliance, that's changing. Those days, it's not if you'll be inspected, it's when.
When, yeah.
It's not if, it's when. And I don't understand why people aren't prepared for that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them aren't, and they're hoping that they're not going to come.
They're just rolling the dice. Well, they're going to come. They're going to come.
So who are the heavy hitters in general of the cannabis business in Los Angeles? And do you see this changing if cannabis becomes federally legal?
Well, I think unfortunately what's happening is it takes a lot of money to stay in the game if you've been here from the beginning, right? So those that aren't managing their capital, or frankly just the contraction of the business a few years ago, I think if people are in a position to where they have to sell because it's just become too expensive and the margins have become too thin, I think there will be acquisition by bigger companies. I think we are going to see bigger brands come in because they're better capitalized. They can afford the six-figure license applications, or they can go in and let you spend the six figures and get your dispensary license and then come buy it from you. So I think we've seen that in every industry, from the five and dime industry, to what we have now, to even hair salons like Supercuts. I mean, you see big brands come in, but alternatively, there's also room for smaller brands. And I think understanding branding is a big component, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, what's so different about your product, right? And really being able to get it out there.
Yeah, well, that's what a lot of these growers are hoping, that their bud is going to be better, that their packaging is going to be more attractive.
Exactly.
So, of the current cannabis laws in Los Angeles and California, which do you think are most problematic for cannabis entrepreneurs and businesses?
I think it's the taxation being so high, right? Some of the fees to get in. There's one city that's looking now, actually just last week, the city council adopted a $250,000 license fee after you've already gone through. Yes,
that's $250,000.
I know. It's.
How is somebody with social equity going to come up with?
Well, that's where they allowed it to be paid over
a period of time.
But if you're not social equity, you fork out $250,000, right?
Right.
So that I see some of the big fees and upfront fees of what you've got to pay. For cannabis. I mean, it's very similar. When I worked in real estate, developers do that all the time, right? They go out and they do an entitlement. They understand they're going to have a year to 2 years of nothing but a burn rate, right?
Right.
So they do their pro forma to account for that, right? And their financial projections to know, it's a couple years maybe, or a year that you're just not going to make any money because the licensing process through the municipality isn't going to be complete. That's one of the things that I see is, again, you're dealing with government, and these regulations change all the time. They're changing because they're new, and industries will come in and say, hey, I know you thought this was a great idea, but when you apply it, it doesn't really work, right? Doesn't serve your objective, government, doesn't serve, your objective as a business owner. So I think we're seeing more of that in terms of regulations, just let's throw the kitchen sink at the industry and then see what works.
Yeah, well,
the fees, the taxation, the length it takes to get a license, right? It's nowhere near the same length as if you wanted to get a liquor license, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think also it's been really made clear by a couple of industry experts that we're under dispensarized, if that's a word, meaning that for the population and the demand, there aren't enough dispensaries licensed in California, right?
And hence the flourishing of the black market.
Exactly. I mean, HDL, which is a well-known consultant in the industry, presented something not that long ago to the city of Fullerton saying, hey, there's a demand for this, right? It's going to help you with the illegal industry.
It's essential.
It's essential. It really is.
Yeah.
So those are the big barriers I see, and hopefully, as cities require the taxation, the revenue, they'll realize they can't make it so hard, right? They can't make it as difficult a barrier to get in, right?
Yeah. So where is this going, say, in the next 5 years?
Well, I think it'll depend a little bit on federal legalization. It's really interesting because when Prohibition ended, a lot of alcohol licenses were given by lottery, right? It's really quite interesting. You didn't have to go in and submit 125 pages of how you were going to do this, but part of it is that there were federal guidelines in place and some local guidelines. I mean, and
a lot less stigma attached to alcohol,
right? And we'll see what happens too, because you've got Arizona's now has the on the ballot for recreational use. We've got more and more cities. So where I see it in 5 years is it's just going to continue to grow, right? The genie's out of the bottle.
Yep.
And it's now really making sure that it would be what I would like to see and what I hope to see in the next 5 years is the industry drive more of the policy rather than the industry react to the policy that's already there, right?
That's the way it should be.
Exactly. And the industry is maturing in California, I think, and UCBA being one of the better examples of it. And I think we'll see that change.
Excellent. And my last question, what should a prospective cannabis business be looking for in an attorney?
I think they need to look for experience. honestly, right?
Yeah.
I think they need to ask the attorney what the reality is of how long this is going to take and what it's going to cost, right? I think that at the end of the day, it's kind of like wanting to build a cheap foundation, right? I mean, in a very elaborate house, it's not going to stand up under stress. I think part of it is look for an attorney who is as entrepreneurial as you are, right? It's easy for attorneys to say, no, can't do that.
Have a little creativity.
It's an attorney who understands business, who gets just as excited about the prospect of a license or a change or how can we get around this legally and protect you, right?
Yeah.
Let's pick up the phone, let's go take a meeting with the city and see what we can do. So I think that that's just as important. I mean, the firms that I came from had that philosophy, right? That's why they had become so successful, is because they became an ally of the business and the industry. So I think that's really, really important. And, there's certain things I don't do as an attorney. Somebody comes to me with really intensive or any kind of intellectual property, I don't do that. I don't pretend I do it, right? So I'm going to refer you to something.
That's a completely new field.
That's a completely new field.
Yeah.
Exactly. If somebody has, I don't know, I've had a few.
So we talk like trademarks or
trademarks,
patents.
IPs. Yeah. If you want to do an intense employment plan, like employee handbook or regulations, or, for that, do you stay at 50 employees in California, or do you stay at, split your company? That's a very sophisticated look, and California has a number of regulations on employment that apply to every business, not just cannabis. So that's not an area of expertise, right? That's something I refer out. So make sure, just like if somebody came to me with a criminal matter, I'd say, hey, I can get you a really great criminal attorney and work with that attorney to the extent that he needs to know what could impact your license, your ability to hold a license, but I can't represent you.
Right.
You don't want me to represent you in a criminal matter because I don't have that area of expertise. So I think that's really, really important that you understand what you need, and you talk to the attorney and you see if they have that level of experience, right? This is your baby. You spent a lot of money. You want to make sure whoever is taking care of it while you're away knows what the heck they're doing.
Yeah. Well, this has been a lot of good information for our listeners, and I thank you very much, Lesa.
This has been a pleasure. Thanks. Thank you so much. Go Cali High.
Yeah, excellent. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Vincenzo.
Cali High would like to thank Lesa Slaughter, California cannabis attorney, for appearing on episode 24. And don't forget to vote, folks. Have a great day.